Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the May 16th, 2019 meeting of the Sacramento Area Flood Control Agency. Will the clerk please call roll and establish a quorum?
Thank you. Matt Conant. Here. Chris Burns. Here. Tom Brandes. Here. Brian Holloway. Cyril Shaw. Here. Angelique Ashby. Here. Jeff Harris.
Here.
Rick Jennings. Here. Sue Frost. Don Natoli. Susan Peters. Howard Schmidt. Here. Patrick Kennedy. And Phil Cerna. Here. We do have a quorum.
Very good. Would you all join me in the pledge, please? Salute. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And may we have the announcements, please?
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This meeting of SAFCA is being broadcast live and will be cablecast without interruption on Metro Cable 14 and will be re-aired on Saturday, May 18th at 2 p.m. and again on Sunday, May 19th at 9 a.m. This meeting is also webcast at www.sacmetrocable.tv, and streaming video of the meeting is available on SAFCA's website within 48 hours after the meeting. Members of the audience wishing to address the board should fill out a speaker form located here on the lectern and bring it to me. When addressing the board, please identify yourself for the record and limit your comments to 3 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm going to use my privilege as chair to read the first item. It's actually my honor to read this resolution of appreciation. Resolution number 2019-047, recognizing Colonel David G. Ray for his contributions to improving flood protection in the Sacramento region on the occasion of a change of command for the Sacramento District of the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. And our Director Johnson will start this off.
Thank you, Chair Harris. I'm going to invite Colonel Ray up to stand awkwardly here by me while we talk about it. So, yes. So, Colonel Ray will be leaving the district here very shortly, and we wanted to take this opportunity to thank him for all of his efforts. He came on board in May of 2016, and the last 3 years have been probably the most progressive in the history of flood control for Sacramento, and it's been under your leadership, sir, so we really appreciate that. In 2017, we had 2 completion ceremonies for the South Sacramento Streams project and for the Folsom Dam Joint Federal Project, but more importantly to us is getting the next 3 projects underway. We've got currently 3 contracts going out in Natomas, but what has impressed me the most is it was less than a year ago the administration announced which projects were going to be given funding under the Supplemental Emergency Appropriations Bill that Congress had passed. And for the entire country, there's a little over $5 billion for states that were not affected directly by the hurricanes. And the Sacramento district received about half of that funding. So this is on top of already one of the largest programs in the Corps of Engineers. And on top of that, the district was doing debris cleanup for the wildfires, had a $1 billion VA hospital assignment to do, and then all of a sudden you get $2.5 billion worth of projects to be delivered in 5 years. And by the way, don't slow down your other missions. So under the direction of Colonel Ray, I've been impressed at how quickly the district was able to stand up, get things going. It's been less than a year, and we've already got the first contract for the American River Common Features 2016 and for the Folsom Dam raise in the procurement process to be awarded this year. So those are just a very, very, very quick highlight, but it seemed almost impossible, and it's been done, and I thank the Colonel for that. Before we approve the resolution and give it to him, I want to turn a little time over to Gary Bardini. Gary has had the opportunity to work more closely with Colonel Ray than I have, both here at SAFCA and at the state, and he wanted to add a few words to that, so thank you.
Good.
Thank you, Rick. Chair Harris. Just to add a little bit to Rick's comments, and I think a little maybe further, I think the activities under Colonel Ray's tenure is the aspects of the high water event 2017, and I had the pleasure of working during some challenging periods there, not only with the high water event along the Sacramento-San Joaquin River as a Deputy Director of Water Resources, but then the Oroville incident itself. And I can tell you through that period, there was many conversations with Colonel Ray directly as these events unfolded, and it was with a lot of support and a lot of resources from the Corps, both assisting the state in the management and deploying folks actually at Oroville itself, and of course the countless amount of folks that were down in the flood control system doing flood fights along the communities all the way downstream, and of course even the communities in the San Joaquin. And it was during this period that I would say that you knew you had a partner, and I'd like to just express my appreciation that not only do we have a partner in the Corps and Colonel Ray's leadership over a very long period, but during these big events it becomes most critical. And so again, I really want to acknowledge both the high water event and of course more importantly the partnership that we've had while I've been here at SAFCA and continuing a number of projects with his folks, including the implementation of supplemental and Natomas projects. So thank you, Colonel Ray, appreciate it.
Excellent.
So if you'll take action on the resolution, then we can present it to him.
So I would,
Moved by you, Chair.
yes, I'd be happy to move the resolution.
Second.
And the second by Director Ashby. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Seeing none, I think we can present the resolution.
Okay, so Colonel,
And
thank you
hopefully
very
get some
much.
words from Colonel Ray. Colonel, before you run off,
First
Maybe-
off, I would like to say thank you very, very much. And as a commander, really it's, I was afforded a very unique opportunity to be part of an exceptional organization. And I accept this resolution on behalf of the many, many engineers, scientists, planners, members of the Sacramento community that make up the Sacramento district. I was afforded some unique opportunities to be part of some things that hadn't happened in California for quite some time, but the relationships that existed between SAFCA and the Corps of Engineers and the Department of Water Resources and the many others involved enabled us all to be successful in navigating the challenges that we faced. And as Gary spoke, I mean, I will definitely, the uniqueness of the first water sort of rolling over the Oroville Dam emergency spillway and the things that unfolded after that, I will take with myself, throughout my life and reflect back on those and the manner at which we all responded to those challenges and then the opportunities that have followed with the Civil Works Supplemental and the partnerships that exist. Mr. Rick Johnson, your guidance, mentorship, engagement has been immeasurable in helping me to understand what direction to move, and the input from each member of the board and here and with the Central Valley Flood Protection Board has been exceptional. So again, thank you all very much for recognizing the district, because that's functionally what my role is to represent the district. And we look forward to accomplishing these amazing tasks that are set ahead of us and improving the flood protection that exists throughout the Sacramento area. Thank you very much.
thank you, Colonel Ray. I'd just like to take a moment to thank you for your distinguished career and indicate that our collaboration with the Army Corps is essential to us here in the Sacramento region. And we appreciate having had you at the helm to work with these last 3 years. It's been a great relationship. Thanks very much for your service. Do we have any other comments from directors? Director Conant.
Sorry. So I'd just like to thank you for your service. This area is, flood protection is critical. It's one of the biggest possible flood areas in the entire nation. And you've worked with both of our agencies in the north. We have SAFCA and SAFCA here. Done a great job moving projects forward. Numerous projects have been done in both districts, and I think it's critical we get these jobs done as soon as possible for public safety. Thank you.
Anything more? Okay. Colonel Ray, thanks very much, and good luck with whatever you get into next.
Thank you, sir.
Madam Clerk, do we have any speaker slips for comments? No speakers not on the agenda. Therefore, we will adjourn to closed session. Okay, we'll reconvene the meeting of Sacramento Area Flood Control Agency. Madam Clerk, will you establish a quorum, please?
Matt Conant. Here. Chris Burns. Here. Tom Barandis. Here. Brian Holloway. Here. Cyril Shaw. Here. Angelique Ashby. Jeff Harris.
Here.
Rick Jennings. Sue Frost. Don Natoli. Howard Schmidt. Patrick Kennedy. Phil Cerna.
Very good. And for the record, Director Burns recused from closed session. Madam
noted.
Counsel, do you have something to read into the record?
Yes. So the board, by motion of Director Harris, seconded by Director Cerna, moved to increase the amount of relocation benefit payments to Jim Rosa and Cindy Johnson in an amount not to exceed $120,000 plus closing costs on a comparable replacement dwelling. The increase is justified in that the project cannot proceed on a timely basis because comparable housing cannot be found, and there is little availability of comparable replacement housing in the project area, and replacement dwellings are not available within the limits of California Government Code Section 7263 or 7264. The Johnsons have limited resources available to provide comparable replacement housing, and 2 of the Johnsons are elderly and 1 is ill.
Very good. Thank you. Madam Clerk, next item, please.
Next item is the Executive Director's Report for May 16th, 2019.
Good afternoon. There we go. So I want to take a few moments to give an update on some of the projects going on. The first one, American River Common Features 2016 project. This is just the overall map to remind everybody of all the features on it. The first update. Oh, there we go. Wrong direction. On the levee work. So right now, the first contract's in the process of procurement to be awarded in July. It's north of where 50 comes across the Sacramento River, but south of Old Sac. So it's in that area. It's a berm contract, so it's kind of a small one. Now we have reached the Corps has identified the work that will be done under the first contract down in the pocket area next year, and I put the following map up. It's a little hard to see, but the green areas are the ones that will be taken care of in this contract that will be going under construction in 2020. So they're going to do 2 other contracts down in the pocket area, still working on what those look like and the extent of that work. We're hopeful by July, August timeframe to know that so that they can get the procurement for the design work going on those things. In addition, the Corps has provided assistance from the Mississippi Valley Division, actually it's the St. Paul District there, who will be reviewing the work that SAFCA has done in the north area to determine if there's any additional work that needs to be done up there. On the erosion part of it, the Corps has the United States Geological Survey doing explorations out in the American River and Sacramento River where the erosion sites are. They're going to be they're doing explorations right now, and then they'll do some additional ones in the fall. The first contract will be in Reach 2, and I'll show you where that is momentarily. The Corps is completing the 35% design actually this month. But in order to try to expedite the process, they are actually modifying their normal review process, and they're going to consolidate their independent review so that we can get this one, try to get that out to bid and awarded next year. So these are some of the modernization, or they call it revolutionizing the Corps process that they're doing to try to expedite some of these designs. So Reach 2 is the one in the yellow there, and that first contract will be in that reach on the erosion work, hopefully next summer. Then on Sac Weir and Bypass, by the end of this month, have the 35% design completed, doing some additional geotechnical explorations, and DWR is still on track to award the contract for widening setting back the levees and widening the bypass levees next year. The Corps' looking at what mitigation needs to be done, but they were able to take advantage of some green sturgeon credits that came available in a mitigation bank. It's something that in the past they probably couldn't have found a way to do, but they have, and so that's a good start, because the green sturgeon, we know we're going to have needing mitigation impacts for those for the erosion work on the Sacramento River. Switching gears over to Natomas, Reach I Contract 1, trying to get the seepage blanket and the water line relocation there right at where Interstate 5 crosses going. I don't know this week what the weather's doing to it, but trying to get that thing going here. Cutoff wall work that will actually close the Garden Highway will be later in June or towards the end of June. We also did have the Corps calls it a media event. It's really a groundbreaking ceremony from the federal side that was going to be held on May 30th. Because of the high water, that's going to get postponed till later in the year. They want to have the event when the media can actually take pictures of activities going on, and there won't be really anything to see at that point there. Reach D, this is the second season going on. That's up on top where they're working on the pump stations and the Vestal drain there. Work will continue into both 19 and 20. Then Reach H, which was on the lower end of the Natomas East Main Drainage Canal, was awarded earlier this year. The contractor's getting going on that one. And then should have the 100%, well, actually the 100% design for Reach B is done, and that's the one where all this real estate we've been working on was needed so that they can award that this year. Reach A is about 35% complete. We're hoping by July to have the 65%, which will inform us better about what the real estate needs will be for Reach A, which is the reach down past where RD 1000 offices are, where Chevy's and all those down in that area. So that's a real intense area from working in an urban atmosphere with facilities on both sides of the levee. So that's the challenging one for us. And then we have some of the other districts helping on the design on Reach E. Switching over to the Folsom Dam raise, we're doing it in a number of different contracts. The work on the main dam will be done under separate contract, and the right and left wing dams are separated. They're going to do dikes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, which are all on this side of the river, probably as one unit. Dike 8 is the one that is in procurement right now to be awarded later this year. They've expedited work on Dike 7 to award that next year, and then Mormon Island will be the following year after that. So that one's moving forward also. Okay, switching to DC a little bit, the House of Representatives a couple of days ago released their draft of the Energy and Water Appropriations Bill, the text part of it for FY 2020. Probably won't see the project-specific numbers until the committee report comes out next week. However, the significant thing is the president had in the proposed budget just under $1.2 billion for construction. The House has upped that to 2.3+ billion. So most likely there'll be an opportunity in the work plan to get some additional funding that we've been asking for Natomas in particular on that one. There were a couple of significant things in there that of note. The legislation prohibits funds from it to be used to move the Civil Works program from the Corps of Engineers to another agency, which will be good for us because that would be extremely disruptive for our projects right now. And then there was also language in that prohibited taking any of the funds from this or any previous appropriations of Civil Works programs to be used for a border wall or security. So that's kind of trying to put that issue to rest there a little bit. Switching gears a little bit, John Bassett provided me a couple of photos I thought I'd share. This is the pump plant on the Natomas East Main Drainage Canal that the Sacramento County operates under an agreement with where SAFCA pays them to do it. They had some problems with one of the pumps that needed to be removed and reconstructed. They're reinstalling it, and so I just thought I'd share the pictures with you on that. The pump was actually rebuilt under contract from SAFCA, but then the county is reinstalling it, and they hired the crane there. So we've got all kinds of activities going on in different spots. And then finally, I did want to let you know that we've got a date. Congressman Matsui will be at our August board meeting that will allow us to thank her for all of her efforts. And at the same board meeting, we're going to just do a little celebration. This is SAFCA's 30th birthday this year, so we'll kind of do both those at the August board meeting. So with that, I'll take any questions.
Comments, questions? I don't see any. I have one comment, and that is Congresswoman Matsui likes to say that we like walls in Sacramento, but they're called levees.
That's right. Thank you.
All right, next item.
Consent matters and items 2 through 10 are in order.
Do we have any comments from directors? Anybody need to pull anything for discussion?
I'll move the consent calendar.
We have a motion from Director Holloway, second from Director Jennings.
What does it go through? It's 10 through what?
2 through 10.
2 through 10.
I'm
Okay.
sorry, 3 through 10.
3 through 10. There you go.
And then, did we do a vote?
Not yet. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstention? Consent carries. Now on to separate matters.
Separate matters, item 11 is information presenting the fiscal year 2019-20 proposed budget.
Good afternoon, Chair Harris, members of the board, Jason Campbell, Deputy Executive Director. It's May, and it's that time again for the fiscal year review, as well as the preparation for the fiscal year proposed budget in June. So as we adventure into these major efforts that Rick described in his report, and we describe what seems on a monthly basis, I wanted to give you a quick little overview of the cash situation and the overall financing before we talk about proposed budget for fiscal year 19-20. As you can see from the pie chart above, we have 4 basic funds that identify the different revenue streams that feed our projects as well as the rest of our operations. You can see the Consolidated Capital Assessment District is sitting at around $15.5 million in the operating fund. I'll get to the fiscal funds in just a second. And then we have O&M and Development Impact Fee and Natomas Basin Local Assessment District, all sitting in around the $10 to $15 million range in the operating funds. As we approach the fiscal year and the aggressive proposed projects and aggressive efforts that we're pushing forward with our partners at the Corps and the state, we still see that the Consolidated Capital Assessment District has just under $43 million in bond funds and assessment revenues sitting in the fiscal accounts, as well as we have some other fiscal accounts that carry some small amounts, or as you see in the Natomas Basin, we still have a couple $1 million in those fiscal accounts covering debt service and reserves. So total sources going into fiscal year 19-20 proposed budget were identified here, where you can see that the total reserves coming from accounts on the fiscal side into the operating funds, we anticipate about $26.6 million coming in. We have additional revenues coming from multiple sources, which we'll get into in just a few minutes, of about $110 million, and then we have an available fund balance that's projected for the end of the current fiscal year that'll be right around $5.5 million, and that is covering all funds. And as you'll see as we move forward in this presentation and also again in June, the appropriations that we're requesting fall under a number of areas. These areas are primarily 75% of our effort related to projects and land acquisitions and other relocations and efforts associated with those projects. It's roughly 75% of our total spend. We have provisions for reserve, where we put money away for those reserve accounts, as well as we have our poultry 2% for salaries and benefits. Services and supplies is roughly around $11 million, and we can see this is the first year that we've actually budgeted contingencies in this way, but we've asked that we carry a $13.5 million contingency line in our budget, and that is because when I get to the revenue side, you'll understand a little bit of the risk that we may carry, but we want to make sure that we have the $13.5 million in contingency so it's easier for your board to take action should we have to move a little bit differently as we move forward with our expenditures and the projects in the fiscal year 1920 arena. We also showed the transfers of $11.7 million. Those are fees or costs coming from other funds into the O&M fund to reimburse labor. That's about $1.7 million. And then we're showing a $10 million transfer from the Thomas Basin Local Assessment District to support projects in the CCAD2 fund. So it's, again, the same projects. We're just moving money from one fund to the other. So this is the area that I wanted to kind of focus on a little bit before we get into the rest of the budget line items. So we have a number of revenues and reimbursements. As we've been bringing forward to you, there are a number of cost share agreements and other things with our partners, primarily the State of California Department of Water Resources and the Central Valley Flood Protection Board. So the blue lines represent about $60.5 million worth of reimbursements that we're anticipating to receive for work performed on their behalf or on part of the projects in cost share. So that $60.5 million gets us pretty far down the line, but you can see that we have another $33.5 million that we don't anticipate to receive reimbursements for in the proposed fiscal year 1920. So as you can see, we've got about $94 million of reimbursements and other revenues that we anticipate from our partnership agreements. Again, those cash flows sometimes materialize faster and sometimes they don't materialize quite as soon as we'd like them to, hence the reason for our budgeting for contingencies in the prior slide. So as we move forward for the proposed fiscal year 20 budget, we have a few budget assumptions that we'd like to make. We know that unfunded liabilities is a big subject that every agency has to deal with, and I'm proud to say that SAFCA, in the fiscal year 1920, we plan to fully fund all of our unfunded liabilities as identified by our actuarial last year. So it's a great milestone, but the budget assumptions are that we would continue to be able to do that. Project priorities, we obviously have a number of projects moving forward. The priorities are fairly clear to most of us. We hope those don't change too much, but we want to understand that the budget is based on the current priorities. And then projects are advancing very quickly, and we hope they continue to be able to advance on schedule. The budget efforts to comply with our budget efforts are geared around us continuing to work towards compliance and keep compliance with ULDC and ULOP, as well as the flood insurance program on the national level. In addition to that, we need to make sure that we are continuously keeping monitoring and understanding that those requirements do not change, because that will definitely affect our budgets going forward. And then, of course, SAFCA's revenue assumptions, as I just mentioned, our state agreements, as well as our other partnership agreements, have a big impact on our revenues, and then our assessment and DIF revenues. We just need to make sure that those are realized ultimately. So rolling through, as we approach our fiscal year 20, we're looking at a fund balance of about $5.5 million overall. We have revenue anticipated in the $137 million range. Total expenses are identified at just under $152 million. We've got that transfers that I just mentioned from one fund to another that shows up in the balance sheet. And then we have our reserve designation for roughly $2.7 million. Total fund appropriations, we're asking for 142. The reason why that's different than the 151 is that transfer kind of makes things a little funky. Overall, sources by each fund. These are the four primary funds that we operate under. The operations and maintenance fund is our general fund. This is where our salaries and services are paid that are not specifically identified to the assessments and the improvements under those assessment districts. This is the O&M assessment. So again, we anticipate a fund balance of about $900 or almost $1 million. We have projected revenues in the $7 million range, primarily from assessments. And then on the DIF and the other assessment funds, you could see total, we're looking to see $5.5 million in available fund balance and projected revenues of $110 million. Expenses by fund, again, primarily geared around delivering projects and supporting project funds. Total expenses of 151 and change for all the funds, and primarily most of those funds are running through the CCAD2, Consolidated Capital Assessment District Number 2. So again, expenses, 325A is our O&M budget, $9.5 million in expense, $8.8 million estimated in revenue, primarily coming from assessments as well as reimbursements for labor. We see a little bit of interest income, and we have a funding agreement with a water district regarding a project, and we anticipate that $635,000 will materialize this year. And as we move into, oh, I forgot to remove those, my apologies. As we move into the development impact fee, we see a little bit of a spike here in the expenses, and that's because we have some projects that are being run through the development impact fee fund. They are reimbursable projects from the state of California related to the Bright landfill, as well as other projects in the lower Elkhorn area. Particularly, we'll get to some of those projects here in a few minutes. But the efforts there are reimbursable, so that's why you also see the state revenue is up in the $5 or $6 million range, as well as interest income hitting it around $100,000 for interest for the cash on hand. So again, I know that we've brought to you multiple times the Bright landfill, as well as the lower Elkhorn Basin levee setback program that the state is performing. We are supporting them with efforts to not only relocate, they're reimbursing us for the Bright landfill, and they're also contracting with us basically to perform design on pump stations for the localized drainage related to the setback levee. The overall efforts in this area are about $13.5 million, and a number of those funds are being reimbursed by the state. When we get into Natomas, again, that $10 million is a transfer from the Natomas Basin project. That $10 million is actually a reimbursement from the state for the EIP, and we anticipate another $11 million to come from the state for the EIP program during this next fiscal year. And we see a little bit of interest and some assessment revenues net from our expenditures. So that makes up the Natomas fund. And then my apologies again. And then again, 325H, Consolidated Capital Assessment District, is the primary fund that we operate for our projects. Expenses of $115 million, revenue in about $81 million. The primary revenue source is the state of California, and we are all continue to use bond proceeds from our bond sale in 2016. So overall, CCAD2 expenses are broken down into two primary areas for the most part. But when we add in Folsom Dam, you can see that it's pretty much 50-50. You can see American River Common Features, Natomas, still floating around $50 million this year, with the American River Common Features 2016 rolling in at $37 million this year in support for the core programs. We have some expenditures that continue for the Folsom Dam raise and the joint federal project. Primarily, those are sunk costs associated with the dam raise, but we do have continuing costs moving forward with our cost share for the joint federal project. Then we have a few other projects that continue to move forward. You can see there's a 1% and 2% of the total spend, but we continue to have closeout opportunities or items that need to be addressed. So there are some ongoing costs there. So overall, here you can see the Folsom Dam. Rick just went over this, so I won't get too detailed, but you can see it's Folsom Dam raise is getting started. We are very excited to see that happen, but we do have some expenditures to cover at this point in time. And then, of course, I'll get a better map for next month. This is the American River Common Features. We anticipate $37 million going into three primary work areas, which Mr. Johnson described in his executive report just a few minutes ago. And then, of course, Natomas Basin, John and team are moving very, very quickly on the funding that we receive from the federal government, or that the Corps receives from the federal government. This is in support of those activities, whether it's real estate or whether it's advancing designs or really just doing relocations and making things happen. So we've got a pretty big spend this coming year for the various efforts that Rick also identified in his previous presentation. So for this fiscal year, we have already noticed the public hearing for June. On June 7th, the notice will be circulated once again through the newspaper and other sources. And then on June 20th, we hope to bring to you the proposed budget for fiscal year 1920. With that, I went through that very quickly. Does anybody have any questions?
Any questions or comments for Jason? Director Shaw.
Thanks, Jason. I appreciate that we have the contingency plan on CCAD1, but I noticed on the bar chart that there were the blue and the other color areas, that those total, the ones that aren't accounted for, or it's the total, I think, is considerably larger than the size of our contingency fund. Is there any chance that we won't get that funding, or is it just the timing of when those funds will arrive?
So we believe that we will receive all the money from the state of California. It's just the timing of those funds. Historically, under the EIP for Natomas, that's the early implementation agreement for the Natomas Basin project that was done under INLIP. We are still collecting those dollars from expenses that occurred years ago. We're working with the state as well as other partners to make sure that we can expedite those reimbursements through actions that we take, or through just hoping that they can move forward more quickly. But we do anticipate that we will receive all of the funds from the cost share that are appropriate. These numbers are based on projections of what our spend is going to be, and then the associated reimbursements for their cost share. And what you see here is just what our projection is. In the blue is what we estimate we will receive this year, and then in the green is what we expect to receive in future years, or hopefully the following year, but it may be future years. This slide was really intended to give you kind of an idea as to what the magnitude of those reimbursements are, because this has ramped up a bit this year.
And how did we decide on the size of the contingency fund? Was it what funds were available, or was there a formula that we used?
So it's just under 10% overall. I believe the calculation is closer to 9%. The idea is that we want to make sure that we have a range. The $13 million roughly in contingency pretty much lines up with what we think is a possibility for us to need should those reimbursements not come in from a cash flow perspective.
Thank you.
Okay, we have a question from Director Holloway.
I just wanted to say I've been on the Finance Committee for a number of years now, and this was the most digestible budget process that the Finance Committee, and I think the board, has had the opportunity to have. I just wanted to compliment Jason and his team on a great, understandable, easy to understand and comprehend budget process this year. So, and another exceptional job. Thank you.
Thank you.
Very good. Anybody else? Okay, that was an information item, and we'll move on to number 12.
Item 12, resolution number 2019060, approving contract documents and authorizing the executive director to advertise contract number 4452 for bid. That's the Sacramento River East Levee Improvements, Beach Stone Lakes Woodland Mitigation and Enhancement Project in Sacramento County, California.
Good afternoon, Pete Gelfi, Director of Engineering. The project before you today is a result of the Corps of Engineers starting work next year along the Sacramento River. That work has construction impacts associated with trees. We were out to try to pre-mitigate for the loss of those trees in a functional manner that takes advantage of the size of the project. It also takes advantage of the fact that SAFCA recognizes that over time, as we go through levee modernization and bringing our levees up to modern standards, that there's high hazard trees out there that would have to be removed as well. And this project looks at mitigating for those losses as well. As I made a mention, this project, or I didn't make a mention of it yet, but this project will create over 30 acres of woodland. It provides additional benefits for providing a wind and wave buffer against the Beach Lake levee. The location of this woodland is on the water side of the Beach Lake levee, and the plantings would occur this fall and winter. For everybody's benefit, this is a graphic that we use for South Sacramento streams. The project itself is located at the bottom end, if I can use a cursor here. We're really talking about the lower end there of the project. That bit of levee there is actually subject to flooding from the Cosumnes and McCollum rivers as it backs up into the Beach Lake floodplain. Winds can drive waves up against that levee. We are going to plant these trees in a manner that will reduce that wave height against the levees. Again, the location, it's along I-5 on both sides. These properties are within the regional treatment plant lands and the Sacramento Area Sewer District lands. The red lines area indicate the mitigation. For east of I-5, this is what at full growth, what the buffer will look like. We are setting at 50 feet from the waterside toe of the levee, giving us room for maintenance. And if there is a need to expand the levee system, we don't have to do it right into the mitigation that we planted. The mitigation is roughly about 150 feet wide, and according to studies that we did, that's about the width that we need in this area to reduce the wave height down to zero. This is a little bit greater detail of where the planting would go. If you can make out, there's some small dots in that area. At one point in time, that was a mitigation area done by the sanitation district. It wasn't that successful. Our project will do some soil remediations, and we expect to have a full growth project at the end. The next area is for west of I-5. You'll see, again, we still have a 50-foot buffer between the waterside toe and the plantings, but this planting is about 250 feet wide. That is a result of greater wind fetch in this area and higher waves, and so we need a thicker, wider buffer to reduce those wind and wave heights, which again is fitting our mitigation needs associated with the project. This one here, north is to your left, I think as you're looking at it. The thicker barrier is up against the levee system. And then there is, if you look at the right-hand side of the page, there is some additional mitigation going in. The desire of the Sacramento Area Sewer District, who owns these lands, they did not want to take as much ag land out of production out of that one field, so we went in with our minimum buffer width, and then the additional mitigation needs were met on the right-hand side of the property there. That isn't as efficient land for the farmer, as you can see how those trees jut out into the ag land. So by us squaring that land off, it makes it a little bit more efficient for the farmer to farm and preserving the bigger piece of property by not having it encumbered as much with mitigation. In addition to this work, since we are taking farmland out of production, water supply on this property is somewhat suspect. The farmer has various mechanisms to provide water. We're going to provide an ag well that will be able to provide water to these properties to make a more stable water supply and increase the productivity of that ag land, offsetting the loss of ag land, by taking it part of mitigation. And with that, that is the end of my presentation. Take any
Director
questions.
Natoli.
Yep. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I got briefed on this some months ago. It's in the area I represent, and I did raise concerns about loss of agricultural land because this is a pretty wide swath of trees. Trees are great, and I understand the need for them. I do think that the well, however, the installation that there is water source, but as I think people said, suspect, but it has, and I don't know if it's been sufficient. So I do think that's an important offset. I would hope that, because we've done other mitigation in this area in the past, and there's been borrow in the past as well. It becomes a pretty easy target for protections that are upstream and of the area. And I would just hope that as we look at the long-term prospects for agriculture, certainly environmental aspects, and obviously flood protection, which is the role of this agency, that we continue to keep in mind. I thank staff for their work to try to offset. I don't think it's a total offset, at least not in my mind. You lose 25 acres of agricultural productivity or something equivalent to that. Maybe not all that acre is planted. A well and water source doesn't compensate, because once that land is lost to a riparian forest, then that's a return to that, then that's what it's going to be for a long, long time to come. But I am supportive of this, and I trust we continue to be in contact with the farmer and or potential farmers and recognizing that's real important. You mentioned something about the soil rehab on the east side of I-5. Are there any things that would enhance the farmability as it relates to drainage and or any other amendments? Because we have in the past scraped some of that topsoil off portions of those fields. Is that correct, Pete?
Yeah, so for our soil sampling, we recognize east of I-5, that isn't great land.
Right, that's not, yeah, I'm talking
And so
about
that's where the remediation is. We weren't planning on doing anything on the west side of I-5 for the tree plantings. We believe the soils are robust enough to provide good growth.
But my point was relative to the agricultural land, the offset. You're putting the well in to provide a reliable water source for, is there anything, because wasn't a portion of the site west of I-5 borrow for previous projects?
I don't think for previous flood control projects, but there might have been other projects in the past that had borrowed from that area. There is one area that could be regraded to help the farmers' irrigation and drainage needs meet, and I think the sanitation district is working with the or the tenant farmer to take care of that as part of this action.
Okay, because drainage gets to be an issue. It's one thing to have a water source, but just south of there in the reclamation districts, many of those fields have tiles underneath them so they can actually get the drainage and actually have productivity for the crops that are grown there, whether they be trees, vines, or other crops. So I guess as we're looking at how we might mitigate for lost agricultural land, recognizing this on sanitation district ground, the long-term plan there is to have it farmable and hopefully have success at doing that, complementary to the flood protection and the trees. And so I guess just as we move forward with this, I'd like to see that pinned down if we can, if there's anything. 'Cause I think as you described, there's an area that's kind of low that doesn't drain really well.
Correct. And so the idea is there's issues with the alfalfa. It's time to be replanted. And so when the farmer was going to replant that, he was going to smooth out that area. And obviously, if he has lost production, we were going to compensate him for that until he can get his field planted.
Okay, but we're not doing any restoration of soils. We're not going to do any.
We're not
irrigation,
taking any soil off the property, and on the west side, we are not planning on doing any amendments to the soil to help with its growth.
Let me pinpoint it. Any drainage improvements? Because drainage is an issue.
Not part of this plan that we're putting out to bid. We're not doing that.
Okay, could you, Mr. Chair, if you could let me know if that's being addressed sufficiently, because I remember when you visited with me some months ago about this, that was
Correct.
part of the consideration there. And again, it's not just the farmer, it's the farmability, and the trees are going to be there forever or for a long, long time. If farming's are going to be there for a long, long time, then that drainage, for those that are farmers on this board, understand that far better than I in those soils. And so, and that is basically a defining area between urban and rural, and obviously the riverine environment as well as the buffer lands and the Beachstone Lakes area. And so I would
I'll work with Brian Young, and we'll get back to you on how we're treating that area that doesn't drain.
All right, that's great. Thanks. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Any other comments on this item? I'd entertain a motion for the resolution. So moved by Director Natoli, second by Director Conant. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstention? Resolution carries.
Thank you.
Item number 13, resolution number 2019-061, approving an agency alignment implementation plan for the proposed pilot feasibility study for YOLO Bypass Integrated Multi-Benefit Program.
Okay, good afternoon. So we've been talking a lot lately about the YOLO bypass. So what we're bringing to you today is just a proposal for how we're going to proceed over the next few months that I'd like you to consider. Just a little background again on this. YOLO bypass was built early 1900s. It's our main protection from the Sacramento River. About 80% of the flows during a large flood event goes through the bypass, and it's really what protects the city of Sacramento from flooding there. It's the way it's set up, where it is actually owned by farmers with flood easements for the most part on it, and therefore the farmers maintain the flood conveyance by their farming activities there. However, it is a federal flood control facility, and it is regulated by the Corps of Engineers and the Central Valley Flood Protection Board. So we've been looking at it, as have a number of other agencies. It is identified as needing to be improved to better protect the urban area here in Sacramento and to address more resiliency in the system to handle climate change and some of the peak flood events that we expect to occur. It's also been identified as good rearing habitat for some of the endangered species like salmon and some of the other salmonoids. It is a major part of the ag economy for both Yolo and Solano counties, and therefore protecting the ag interests over there is critical. And so that brings some conflict when some of the agencies are looking at introducing special status species in there. It does impact the ability to operate and maintain not only the flood system, but some of the water supply facilities over there. So we see a lot of people looking at the bypass, a lot of agencies looking at it, and sometimes not always in a compatible way. Number of studies done lately in 2012 and again updated in 2017 was the Central Valley Flood Protection Plan, which identified improvements to the Yolo bypass for flood and ecosystem restoration. Further outcome of that was the regional Lower Sacramento River Delta North Regional Flood Management Plan, which identified more at the regional and local levels activities that needed to be done for all the entities that are affected out there, again at the multi-benefit type of a level. But then the Corps of Engineers with the state of California had undertaken the Sacramento River General Reevaluation Report to look at what the Corps could do from a flood control standpoint in the Yolo bypass. Unfortunately, the Corps' current processes makes it difficult to look at anything at a system-wide level, and they were unable to come up with any type of a justification out there for improving the bypass from their standpoint. You've seen these maps before. This just shows in the upper end all the agencies and projects that are being proposed. You can see how they're affected by each other and on top of each other, and this is down at the lower end. So we literally have dozens of individual projects going on out there by various agencies that some of them are multi-purpose, a lot of them are single purpose, a lot of them are on top of each other. The key thing about that is none of them can be moved forward without approval from the Corps of Engineers, and the Corps through their study wasn't able to find a way of having a federal interest out there. So 2015, the state formed the Yolo Bypass Cash Through Partnership, which we've been a part of, and Chair Harris is the board representative on that, to try to start promoting collaboration along those lines. So why is this so important to us in Sacramento? Just to give a few examples, during the 200-year flood event, if we widen the Fremont Weir and Yolo bypass, we get almost a 3-foot reduction in stage at the upper end of Natomas, and it's still about a foot down at the I Street Bridge, and then it continues downstream. This allows the waters flowing from Placer County that back up at the upper end of Natomas and can't get across the Natomas Cross Canal during a large event and have to come down the east side. This allows those to move over more efficiently. So it actually ends up providing benefits to the levees completely around Natomas. That's during a 200-year event. Now, during, in combination with our other projects with the widened weir and bypass, that will allow us to be able to handle a 500-year event here from the Sacramento River. And then it does provide us just resiliency in the system. So I tried to show this graphically. The green there shows the areas where this is just the Fremont Weir widened and the Yolo bypass, where you see benefits from that. And then you'd seen this picture before. This is just widening the Sacramento Warren bypass. So you put those on top of each other, and you can see those two projects together really help the Sacramento area. So what you have today in front of you is an implementation plan for how we're going to take the next steps over the next few months. Basically, the problem we have is we've got a lot of agencies. They're all looking at the yellow bypass. The Corps couldn't find a way to justify its involvement out there. So we're looking for some federal and state legislation that will help us move this stuff forward, and I'll explain a little bit here. So you've seen this again. Originally it's flood control. Currently it's multi-purpose, and we've got to figure out how to move forward and address all of those. So the pilot study be authorized both at the federal and state level, would be undertaken by the Corps with the state of California and Central Valley Flood Protection Board, and then involvement with some of the appropriate regional and local agencies. We have an opportunity here because Congress in the Water Resources Development Acts of 2014, 16, and 18 directed the Corps to do a number of things. They directed them to look at how to work better and utilize non-federal sponsors' resources better. They directed the Corps to look at more multi-benefit approaches. Right now they're pretty narrow to single benefit projects. They looked at how to better manage flood risk for the urban areas. They want them to look at how to better quantify the benefits from federal flood projects. Well, the Corps to date really hasn't been able to come up with a way to do anything with these mandates from Congress. So as part of the pilot program, we want to get some authority to use the YOLO bypass as a pilot to demonstrate how this can be done. And hopefully out of that, we can find a way to have the Corps involved in a justification for a multi-purpose project that would also serve as the umbrella that any project that needs to move forward, you'll hear the term of 408 permit. The Corps of Engineers has to give section 408 of the law that requires anyone that modifies a federal flood facility to get a permit from the Corps. And to do that, you have to show that you're not impacting the ability of the flood system to move water. And so that's almost impossible to do on an individual project basis in a system as large as the YOLO bypass. So we need to be able to establish a baseline for doing that. And hopefully out of that, we will show a process that can be used nationwide to help in urban areas and system-wide. And also, we want to get a specific project for the YOLO bypass justified out of it. Again, like I mentioned, 500-year level of protection and serve as these baseline for the more the whole system to move forward. So what we're doing right now is asking for you to approve this implementation plan. This will give what we're going to do over the next couple of months to develop and promote federal legislation for Water Resources Development Act of 2020 and state legislation to be executed hopefully prior to that, and then also develop a more detailed implementation plan for accomplishing that. We've got, working with the agencies, Congressman Matsui's office and a number of consultants, we'll need to be refining the concept at the federal level. Next month, Chair Harris is going to be coming back with us to DC. We want to use that as an opportunity to introduce the idea and advance it with a number of agencies and members of Congress and others. And then also start preparing that legislation for introduction. Same time, do basically the same thing over at the state level. Refine the concept and start preparing the legislation. And then as we move forward over the next few months, we'll be developing a more detailed implementation plan for how we'll go all the way out to when we get that legislation through Congress and the state level. So ask, why are we so interested in doing this multi-purpose wise? Well, we've learned the hard way over the years that we've got to be able to look at the needs of everyone. as we're looking at the bypass. And as mentioned before, the ag interests out there, the ecosystem interests out there, and others. So we found at the regional level that we were able to come up with a plan that would help everyone, all their boats rise, you hear often. And this is very consistent with our mission. Just a reminder that our mission is flood protection, but also to preserve and enhance the environment while we're doing that. So we find this very, very consistent there. So with this resolution, we're asking to approve the short-term implementation plan for us to move this forward over the next few months until we develop a longer-term one to bring back to the board. So with that, I'll take any questions.
Thank you, Rick. I'd just like to make a couple of comments. As you know, Rick is not overly loquacious, but, given what he just said, which was a pretty lengthy speech about the importance of the YOLO bypass, I don't think you can overstate it. The bypass and the means by which all the various agencies collaborate, especially getting a programmatic 408 permit, is very, very important to our flood control project. So I'd like to go ahead and move the resolution, and then if there are any other comments?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Very good. Resolution carries.
Item number 14, resolutions authorizing the executive director to execute contract actions for the Bright Landfill Remediation Project, Yolo County, California. Two resolutions. Number 062 authorizes negotiation and to execute an amendment to the funding agreement with the State of California Department of Water Resources. And Resolution 063 authorizes awarding the construction contract number 444 to the lowest responsive and responsible bidder, and authorizes the executive director to execute the contract.
Mr. Tibbetts.
Thank you, Chair Harris and members of the board. So the SAFCA role in the Bright Landfill Remediation Project. In 2015, the Army Corps of Engineers completed the American River Common Features Project General Reevaluation Report. That report was authorized by Congress in 2016 as part of the WARDA Act of that year. The GRR, and therefore the WARDA 16 authorized project, included widening the Sacramento Weir and bypass to increase the flood flow conveyance through that facility, reducing the flood risk for the Sacramento metropolitan area. SAFCA and the state of California, as non-federal partners to the Army Corps of Engineers for that project, are required to provide all lands necessary for that WARDA authorized project. And per requirements for WARDA authorizations, lands provided for federal projects are to be free of hazardous and contaminated waste. The Bright landfill is a hazardous and toxic waste site that needs to be remediated prior to the setback levee. SAFCA and California Department of Water Resources are therefore obligated to remediate the Bright landfill prior to the Sacramento Bypass Setback Levee project. Little context, the Bright landfill is located immediately north of the Sacramento bypass and immediately east of the YOLO bypass. You can see it on the graphic up. It was operated as a burn dump between 1940 and 1974, and the landfill contains solid waste debris and construction debris. I'm going to use the mouse to show where the landfill is on this image. Right there. And when the Sacramento bypass setback levee is completed, as you see on this image, the existing landfill will be within the footprint of the expanded bypass system. So there are two prior board actions that we need to revisit today. The first is in February of 2017, the board approved entering into a funding agreement with the California Department of Water Resources to remediate the Bright landfill. That agreement provided for SAFCA to perform all the design and construction work and be 100% reimbursed by California Department of Water Resources. We need to revisit that agreement today to amend the agreement to increase the budget to cover additional costs not anticipated at the time of the funding agreement. Additionally, in December of 2018, I brought an action before the board to approve the plans and specs for solicitation of a construction contract. The bid process from that resolution in December has been carried out, and we have a recommendation for the board today to award a construction contract. The first off, details for the funding agreement. Again, SAFCA entered into a funding agreement in January of 2017 based on board approval at that time. And the funding agreement called for SAFCA to complete all the design and construction work and then be fully reimbursed by DWR. The approved budget at that time was $8.7 million. Since that time, certain items have materialized that have either been experienced from a cost growth standpoint or will be during construction. First off, we were not able to get a construction contract awarded as early in the calendar years we had hoped. We were targeting the March, April timeframe, and to be able to push the construction contractor to complete the project in one construction season. Because of various issues, permit-wise and land acquisition-wise, we're a little later on awarding the construction contract, and therefore we needed to allow for construction to occur over 2 construction seasons. Therefore, there's a bid item included to winterize the site and keep it from releasing contaminated waste to the environment. Additionally, the California Department of Toxic Substance Control has mandated the installation of a geosynthetic clay liner to encapsulate all contaminated material, which was more expensive than the just clay liner that was anticipated at the time of the funding agreement award. And then third, there are requirements to mitigate through a mitigation bank and through Yolo County's HCP program. The additional cost for these efforts is anticipated to be not more than $2.2 million. So we're therefore asking for an amendment to the funding agreement with DWR to increase it from approximately $8.7 million to $10.9 million. And on that, California Department of Water Resources is agreeable to amend the funding agreement. Regarding the construction contract, in December of 2018, I brought before the board the plans and specs for approval by the board and approval to solicit for a construction contract, contract number 4444. The notice to contractors was advertised. Plans and specs were available for download from the Sacramento County website. 68 contractors and or subcontractors downloaded the plans and specifications. 2 addendums were issued during the bidding period. On April 25th of 2019, the bid opening occurred and there were 5 bids submitted for the Bright Landfill remediation project. Following the bid opening, bids were reviewed to determine if there were any math errors or any other anomalies per the specifications and the bid form. Bid amounts were presented in a notice of intent to award to the 5 bidders. Based on review of the bids, the 3 apparent lowest 3 bids were Odin Construction at $5.2 million, followed by Tykert & Son at $5.6 million, followed by American Integrated Services at $6 million. One bid was found to be non-responsive due to discrepancies between, for a particular bid item, discrepancies between a unit price and a total price for that bid item. That bid was number 4, and any resolution of that discrepancy would not have changed the ranking of that bidder. The remaining 4 bids were found to be responsive bids from responsible bidders. The engineer's final opinion of probable cost for the contract is $6.46 million. SAFCA staff and consultants have reviewed the bids, and staff recommends that the bid by Odin Construction Solutions is the lowest responsive bid from a responsible contractor. Staff therefore recommends that the board award contract 4444 to Odin Construction Solutions in the amount of $5.19 million. When I last brought the Bright Landfill project before the board in December, I identified about a half dozen items that needed to be resolved prior to being able to recommend awarding a construction contract. All 6 of those items have been resolved. Quickly go through those items. First, the Department of Toxic Substance Control had not approved the final remedial design and implementation plan at the time of the last board presentation. That occurred at the end of December 27th. Land possession had not occurred. SAFCA, or actually Yolo County, came into possession of the CAMU site portion of the property on April 12th. And then 4 permit or environmental actions. The 401 water quality cert was received on March 15th. The SHPO concurrence was received on March 21st. The biological opinion was received on March 20th. And the Section 404 permit from the Corps was received on April 8th. So based on the above, I'm asking that the board approve 2 resolutions, the Resolution 62 and 63. The first, authorizing the executive director to negotiate and execute an amendment to the funding agreement with DWR to increase the budget by $2.2 million from 8.7 to 10.9 million. And second, awarding a construction contract 4444 to the lowest responsive and responsible bidder, Odin Construction Solutions, in the amount of $5.19 million, and authorizing the executive director to execute the contract.
Thank you, Dan. Do we have any questions or comments from directors? Seeing none, I'd entertain a motion for both of the resolutions. So moved by Director Natoli, second by Director, was it Shaw? Oh, Burns. Okay, very good.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? They both carry.
Item number 15 is resolutions authorizing the executive director to amend consulting services contracts for flood risk management planning services. There are 14 of those listed here below, and 4 environmental services contracts on an as-needed basis to support execution of SAFCA's programs and projects.
Thank you. Chair Harris, members of the board, Gary Bardini, Planning Director. Before you, as mentioned, is we have 18 resolutions. 14 of them are associated with work under our MSA agreement for planning services, and 4 are related to services in our MSA agreement for environmental. Just a bit of a summary of this is the aspects of the work, a lot of it described by the executive director and folks here, is we have a number of efforts along the way, those in support of the supplemental work with the Corps of Engineers, particularly direct assistance, and then our own ability to provide for the lands and easements and other activities in support of those projects. The efforts to further in the aspects of improving 500-year protection in the region, some of the things described here in the Yola bypass and those in the upstream efforts that we have. in the region. And of course, our efforts in dealing with the ongoing land management efforts, those tied to our restorations and mitigation obligations that we have. With that all being said, tied to the budget this year that Jason went over, the needs of services have been greatly increased and needed from our previous year. In some cases, about from where we planned a year ago to today, it's about a 3 times or 1.5 times, depending on the services. So in the aspects of the planning services, the request is for 14 is to increase our capacity up to $9.4 million to meet that, where the previous year we estimated to be about 3. And then the aspects of our environmental services improving up to $4.5 million for this year, where previously we were in the neighborhood of about $2 million. So with this in mind, the services before us are varied in general. Those from planning, those due to efforts related to hydraulic modeling and water resource evaluations and economic analysis, those related to facilitating our financial grants and reimbursement efforts, those related to project management efforts across the efforts with the Corps and with the state. On the environmental side, we're doing a fair amount of support related to cultural resource services, environmental planning, those tied to permitting compliance, et cetera. Some of the things that supporting, just like Dan's effort with Bright. A little bit on direct assistance that we've received from the Corps to date. A little bit is we've had a number of efforts directly from the Corps to ask us to support their efforts in delivery. It's been quite extensive on all areas, that on the American River, on the erosion repair, that's from doing the design to the hydraulic analysis, sediment transport modeling, efforts related to environmental resource assessments are quite varied, and including cultural resources. Same thing is occurring on the Sacramento erosion efforts, and we're starting to stand up the hydraulic modeling support of the Corps in those efforts. The aspects of the Sacramento Weir, we are providing, again, modeling support in Flow 2D and et cetera, modeling to the Weir, and then doing the environmental work in support of the Corps. We also have efforts on supporting the direct design work and the seabed stability work in the Sacramento with the Corps, and we're doing efforts on the Folsom Rays itself, particularly around studies on specific aspects related to the spillway itself and its features, and then, of course, the emergency diagram. So there's a number of efforts that the Corps has asked us as we've been moving forward. I do anticipate these services going down as the Corps brings its resources up, and then our efforts of having to backstop their resourcing and delivery will go down. Just in real quick on the contracts itself, under the 14, 8 of these are for between $100,000 to $300,000 this year as the amendment. 1 is for $400,000. The other is for $1 million. 3 of them are at $1.5 million, and then 1 is at $2 million. The number, or the amount here, is predicated on 2 things: the aspects of the number of services qualified on the original contract on the MSA, in this case here, what we did last year. The second thing is basically based on the amount of work that the Corps is asking in direct assistance. On the environmental side, we have 2 contracts at $750,000 we're amending, and another 2 at $1.5 million for this year. And again, the additional amount for the other 2 is because they're the ones that are being asked directly by the Corps to further the work from previous efforts. So with that, moving forward, this is a work in progress. We are continuing to strengthen our management and coordination with the Corps in properly the resource loading to meet the schedule over the next 5 years of the work under the supplemental and the other efforts, including Natomas. And then, of course, the last thing is there's an ongoing aspect of us to provide quarterly reporting to the board with any task orders that are done. The last one that was done was just last in April. So with that, I'd be happy to take any questions.
Yeah, Director Ashby.
Thank you. I just need to recuse myself on this item, Chair.
Very good. Noted in the record. Director Ashby is recused from this vote. Any comments or questions for Mr. Bardini?
Going to spend a lot of money.
Moved by Director Shaw, and second by Director Conant. It's a lot of work spending $1.8 billion. All right, all those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstentions?
Thank you.
And that is the last of our items on the agenda. Do we have any comments by directors, questions, anything to enter into the record? Seeing none, we thank you very much, everybody, and we are adjourned at 4:32.